Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. Today is a special episode. It's the 52nd episode, which means we've successfully done 1 year of weekly podcasts here at Thrust Flight, and I'm pretty excited about that. It's probably the most consistent I've been at anything. So to celebrate, we have a special guest, Hunter. He's the VP of Thrust Flight, and we're doing something special by having this podcast episode in our main hangar, just to kind of give a little more life to the video. So if you're listening on streaming platforms, it might be a good time to finally experience what it's like to watch the video. But today we'll be talking about some of the things that people always have questions about. Part 141 schools, the difference between moving fast and not. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. Before we do any of those things, we'll let Hunter introduce himself briefly if you guys haven't met him before.
Yeah, Hunter Gravely, Vice President of Ops here at Thrust Flight. I don't know about special guests, but I'm a guest today. First time being on the podcast, I believe.
Which is funny because you were on the YouTube channel a lot at one point, I think.
Yeah, I started here making the YouTube videos. That was I was in film down in Austin for like 5 or 6 years, and then I was at I'm 26, 27, and I'm taking a change in my career, and Thrust Flight had an opening for a content creator, and I was doing what you guys are doing now, much worse than you're doing it now. And met Patrick, fell in love with his passion for the industry and for the business, started learning the flight school business, helped with the launch of Zero Time to Airline, which is now our staple product. I've been here since. That's going to be fun during this whole interview.
Yeah, that's why I want people to watch the video if they have to.
This is real. We're at an airport. This is it. This is flight school.
Exactly. That I want people to know.
Was here whenever we launched Zero Time to Airline. Came up with the program with the company and with Patrick, and at the time we had Liz Brassall, who was a big part of building that out, and got to watch it grow. Got to watch Thrust Flight start to expand to new locations. Moved up from marketing to operations to kind of doing both, and here I am today.
I kind of want to just ask some of the basic questions first. You guys started here at Thrust Flight. What are some of the things that you're excited about that's going on right now? Maybe that I don't know about. I don't know, something you can say.
Well, we've got a bunch of aircraft orders in place right now. And we've got, I think, 12 coming in the next 2 months, and 20 on the whole year, and another 30 or something next year. I mean, we placed an order a year and a half ago for 50 new PA-28s.
Wow.
So the plan with that obviously was to grow. We launched our Denison location back in 2021, which that was a very special location to me because it was the first location we opened. I oversaw a big part of that project. It was 15 minutes from where I grew up, and that was kind of our way of testing the waters to see what does scaling look like. Then we launched Conroe last year in 2024 with this big order looming, and kind of the plan all along has been scale growth. We've got this formula figured out. We've figured out how to do this, kind of copy and paste it at different places. The quality has remained consistent after some trial and error on that, and so I'm just really excited about becoming a national brand in the flight training industry and being able to compete with the biggest of them. We'll leave the elephant in the room on names, but being able to compete at that level, at the national level, where Thrust Flight becomes the household name for flight training. That's kind of my dream, and what Patrick's dream is, and what he's communicated, I think, very effectively throughout the whole organization. And so I'm excited to get to go try that.
Yeah, I came in here about a little over a year ago. I've been doing, I guess, this for about a year, is why this is at a year now. A lot has happened. It seems like we have been growing a lot, and you guys have a lot of plans. To be able to compete at that level comes with a lot, and that's what I would want to ask you about, because I'm a part of this company, and the more we grow, the more our name is known, the more people want to talk about us and say, oh, Thrust Flight, have you heard about Thrust Flight? I guess what I really want to know, what are some of the foreseeable challenges when trying to scale up this business while trying to maintain quality training?
Yeah, it's maintaining quality training, consistency, and you've got to balance the aspect of this that is the personal touch, which we absolutely want. It's key to our culture, and figure out how to train that to people that, I mean, quite frankly, they're not here. They're not under our nose like what we had in Addison. So when we opened Denison, that was one pain point, was figuring out how to copy and paste this winning formula that we've developed here in Addison. And a lot of that comes down to the people. People is, I think, always going to be the hardest part of this business, is finding the right talent and finding the right people that you can trust to go out there and take your baby, your brand, and do it the way that you've designed it to be executed.
And I've gone to all the locations. I think we're doing a good job right now at seeing what it looks like to scale personally, just from going around and having a camera and filming everyone. I'm just excited to see how it keeps going. I like the growth side of it. It's interesting to me. So
yeah.
One question I have, I just want to get down into the people a little bit more. CFI, like, how does someone become a CFI here at Thrust Flight?
Yeah, so that's like talked about a lot online.
Yeah.
More so than I would expect, and it makes sense if you think about the student journey. Like, you're selling a career. That's what we're doing. We're selling a career. It's important to these guys that whenever they're done with their flight training, they've got a viable option for time building to that 1,500 hours. And so everyone's, that CFI level, that CFI job level is very important to everybody.
Yeah.
But we don't guarantee a job. I don't think that any flight school really, truly, actually guarantees a job to everybody that signs up for their program. But I mean, we don't even guarantee a job for the majority of the people that go through this program. I think on average, and it fluctuates based on what our needs are at the time. So if we're opening 2 locations at once in the future, we're going to hire more than what we would hire if everything was going steady.
Right.
But in general, if you look over like the last 12 months, a little less than 20% of all of our students get hired as CFIs. The way that we pick who those 20% are is by a scoring system that we've actually refined very thoroughly in recent months. So as you're going through the program, your instructors are taking notes on what kind of a student you are. As you go through our CFI Academy, where we teach you how to instruct, our academy director is taking notes on what kind of an instructor you're going to be. And by the time you get to your actual interview, which you can't interview for Thrust Flight until your CFII is completed. Okay. But once you complete your CFII, you're welcome to interview. We guarantee an interview to all students. If you are a student at Thrust Flight, we will interview you.
Is that what people are responding to online? That we guarantee an interview, and then maybe is that what gets brought up about CFIs?
And I think I've talked to you guys in the marketing department about this. Is somehow there is this talking point online where people will say Thrust Flight doesn't actually guarantee a job, and I'll read those. I'm like, where did they get the idea that we? I hear our admissions coordinators on the phones all day, and all day they're saying we don't guarantee a job, we guarantee an interview.
Right.
So if you're watching this, you're not guaranteed a job. But we do hire exclusively internally, with very few exceptions over the past couple of years. So it's all internal hires, and we get the best. We get the top 20%, and it's based on those scorecards that I was talking about. So by the time you go to your interview, we've got this matrix on you where we've graded you across all of these different variables. Okay. And then you'll do a in-person interview where they ask you some questions, they ask you some teaching styles. My favorite question that they ask during that interview is, how would you make your students' experience better than yours? Because that's a big part of this, is we need to be continually getting better. If you're not improving, you're getting worse.
Right.
So they score you on that interview, they score you on a simulator interview, and then at the end of it, we tally up the scores, and whoever scores the highest is who gets the jobs. So top 20 scores on that matrix is who works at Thrust Flight. And
then they do the interview to kind of just make sure that everything checks out, right?
Yeah, the interview is really, we've got this internal feedback loop, right, where we can say, all right, people are scoring bad on or whatever it is. FOIs are unimpressive lately on the interviews, and then we'll go back to the academy and figure out, do we need to tweak anything on how we're teaching the FOIs, for instance. But it's this nice internal feedback loop where students we're creating our own product, essentially.
And that's, I think that, I don't want to get too in the weeds about it, but the word culture, like the word like it's to cultivate is the verb.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and that's what it looks like to me. I think copying what other people do, especially when you don't want their flaws, is not a good idea.
That's great. That's a great point. Cultivate is the verb for culture.
Yeah.
You should be in marketing.
Well, maybe I am. Okay, well, I like what you said. I wanted to ask those questions because I want people to understand that you take the training very serious and that you pay attention to the details. And I have probably some bigger questions coming up now. But before I ask you about some of those, for context, can you give me a little bit more of an idea of who you talk to, what you talk about every day, what kind of information you're taking in and putting out every day, so that the viewer can understand that this is what you do every day, and that way when I ask you some of these questions, they can kind of understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I am over operations, I'm over sales and marketing, and I'm over our tech, our systems. So probably my biggest challenge in general in this role is getting all three of those kind of sections of the business to work well together. Mm-hmm. If sales is not pitching the product that marketing is putting out there, there's going to be some friction. If operations is not executing on what the students were sold, there's going to be some friction. I know all this because I learned it the hard way. Yeah. We haven't always batted 1,000 on that. So getting those to align and be a cohesive unit working and pointing towards the same goal is really what my job comes down to. And then we've got the tech department, the systems guys that collect all this data, and they do a great job of collecting all this data that basically affirms mine and Patrick's gut check on how the business is doing. Mm-hmm. It feels like commercial's not doing that good. What's the pass rate? We need to improve here and here. Where are they failing? Power off 180s need to be something that we look at. So it kind of goes back to that internal feedback loop that I was talking about. Nice. So in my role, I've got to know, I've got to really have my pulse on the day-to-day of the business and how we're executing. And so, you guys always make fun of me in these meetings because I'm rattling off figures, and it's not. They're pretty dang close if they're not spot on whenever I'm rolling those off the top of my head because I live and breathe this stuff every day. Yeah, that's what your job is, right? You got to make sure things are operating well. You work over operations as well, right? What does that kind of look like? So each of the location managers for all of the satellites kind of does their own thing, but then I'm looking at the overall health of the organization so that we don't get too focused on success independent of branches. Now, if one location is lagging in some metric, I need to investigate that and figure out if I can help that manager boost that location up. But usually if something like that's going on, there's a reason and the location manager is already aware of it and they're working to fix it. But I'm more focused on, in general, what is the organization producing as a whole, because I think we've done a pretty good job of copy and pasting that formula, like I was talking earlier. Yeah. So that if something is, like right now we're trying to get private hours down a little bit lower. Private hours we're good. We're we're around 56 hours average, but that's kind of the area where we can improve the most right now. So that's happening across the board. It's not like it's just an Addison problem or it's just a Conroe problem. The locations all kind of tend to match. Whenever
so that's a good sign though, to have something that's consistent across locations if there's a focus point.
Yeah.
Because that means the system is copy and pasted and the system as a whole can be improved. It seems.
And on the other side of that, we had a situation sometime last year where Denison was doing a lot better on instruments completion times. The hours were like 4 or 5 hours less on average than Conroe and Addison, which is significant. It couldn't have been 6 months ago because Conroe didn't have that many instrument students. This must have been like back in November. We're in 2025.
Yeah, time's moving quick. Yeah, time is moving quick. I think November is about 6 months ago, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
Mathematically, they commented one time and said, I didn't know how to count months. So just letting you know, you're probably going to get that. Well,
but they were executing really well on instruments, and it came down to something unique they were doing with their ground, and so we copied that across all of our other locations. Yeah. So there's a little bit of uniqueness to each location that you look at, but typically my job is to say, okay, how's this whole organization doing in our formula for executing this, and how can I tweak that formula to make it better?
Right. That makes sense. I like that. When you hear copy and paste, someone could be concerned that it's sort of too formulaic, and maybe someone can fall through the cracks of something like this. And I think that kind of leads me to what the hard questions I want to ask, right? I see things online about Part 141 schools and loans and financing and careers in the industry. And I mean, obviously we have a lot of students here that said, I want to do this anyways, but I want to ask you those questions. I feel like you can answer those the best. I wouldn't really want to go there with anyone else, but I guess I'll jump straight into how do we make sure that we're not too big to not lose track of the individual. The student comes in here, they don't know anything, they want some guidance, and they want to get to the airlines. I mean, what is it that we do as we grow to make sure that that person isn't being lost?
I'm kind of going to sound contradictory here, but I feel like the solution to the concern you're addressing is formulaic. We have systems in place to make sure that a student doesn't go so many days without flying. That's part of the formula. We have regular events scheduled every single month at each of our locations that cultivate a culture of instructors getting to know their students, and the operations staff getting to know the students by name. We've got part of our formula is enforcing these events to develop that culture. So I don't think that formulaic and the copy paste, but processes don't take away individualism. They can help enforce it a little bit.
I like that. That's a good point. I wouldn't have thought of that answer, honestly. So I can see that, though. I see that with what we do. We do ZTA Day and things like that, and we're a part of that, too. My team, making
every
sure
location does ZTA Day. It's not just Addison. That's part of the formula, and I think that you can't...
It's easy to underestimate that part of the formula. I think that's what the problem, I guess, is.
I think people don't think it's part of the formula.
Yeah.
But it very much is. There is a process at Thrust Flight that on the first day of ZTA Day, you feed the students, you do a pinning ceremony. That's part of the formula, and it develops a culture. If it's not part of the formula, you don't have a scalable solution.
And do you think that these things that you're talking about, like the culture and events and, checking in with our students, like how does that really translate into helping them succeed in our program? Because you hear culture, you might have a job, they talk about the culture there, this and that. Like, how does it translate into helping them succeed? Could you kind of like paint that picture? Because
yeah, that one might not be directly measurable, but I don't think you can put that on a spreadsheet. But
I guess it's the idea of it.
There are no shortage of flight schools that will see their students as a number and punch holes in the sky with their students and take advantage of that. I think that when you have a culture that cultivates a sense of individualism, where you feel like the people that you're interacting with at your school know who you are, you get to enjoy multiple events every month with your classmates, and you feel like you're part of a community. That's important. The Zero Time to Airline program, for most people, 22, 23, 24 years old coming into this thing, it's going to be the hardest thing they've ever done in their life. Most people have not done something harder than this. It's 9, 12, 13, 14 months of very intense training, very rigorous. You're getting put through the ringer. You can't do that at a place that you don't feel at home at. You can't do that by yourself. You need to have a sense of community around you supporting you. That's why behind this plane right now, there's a group of students sitting around talking and studying. Like that's a support group that I think makes Thrust Flight really unique, and that's the culture that we try to cultivate.
Okay, well, because I've always wondered that, like what is the role culture plays in an organization's success and down to the individual. This is another big question. I really want to know, because people worry about this before they get here, but I don't hear about this from people here. Everyone here knows that this is what they want to do, but there's people who are thinking about what they want to do, and they're concerned about whether or not they're going to be able to get to the airlines for their career. What do you say about that? People who graduate here, are they likely to be able to get a job?
Oh yeah. If you're talking about like you get through the program, you've got your ratings, how likely is it that you're going to get a job?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that's gone all the way through this program and been finished for any substantial amount of time that doesn't have a job. Are people going to be knocking down your door 2 months after you graduate? No, not usually. Sometimes maybe the industry's got that much demand, but look, we've got a conference that we do every year that a bunch of flight schools go to. I was there in February, and there were 3 or 4 schools there talking about needing CFIs, and this is like the most CFI saturated I've seen the market since I've been here, and there's still schools somewhere in the country that don't have enough CFIs. You might have to live in Wisconsin or somewhere that you don't like, but it's not like the jobs just don't exist.
Yeah.
We are coming out of 2021 and 22. It was either 21 and 22 or 22 and 23. I think it was 21 and 22 were the 2 biggest hire years for pilots in the history of the industry. 21 was the all-time record. 22 dipped like 6% less. So we've got this group of people that are hearing about how wonderful it is in 21, 22. They start looking into the career, they start looking into the program, and then 23, 24 comes along, and it's not just the best it's ever been. You might have to wait a little bit for a job, or you might have to seek a little further outside of what you would consider your home base to get that job. And I think the industry's dead. Look, nobody can get a job.
Yeah. Well, I hear people saying that. I mean, I think sometimes I'll read things and they'll say things like, I can't get a job, or will I be able to get a job?
And so there are people out there that are on month 4 of looking for a job that may not have. I'm not trying to say those people don't exist, and I'm certainly not wanting to invalidate the how scary that scenario can be.
Right.
But you said earlier, if you know this is what you want to do, it's not like you're just going to be 10 years down the road with all these certificates that you're still paying a loan off of, and for 10 years you've just been trying to get a job in this field and you can't do it. Like that's not happening. It's going to come back. Now,
and comparatively, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off. I have a question though.
Does your specific financial situation make sense for you to get this done in 10 months versus 3 years? I can't talk to that for everybody. I think in general it makes more sense to do that, but certainly there's a conversation at least to be had on that topic.
Okay, gotcha. And it came up once or twice in what you just said about pricing and cost and things like that. So it's a lot of money to learn how to fly a plane in order to have a career at the airlines, and we're a career-centric program. We want to help people have a career in the airlines, or flying jets in general, whatever they'd like to do. But that's why it's called Zero Time to Airline. I guess I asked this because someone could be going to school, and maybe they find a cheaper university that's like $50K or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing numbers out there, but like there's risks there. There's risks here. But what are those? Should we be afraid of the number that we see when trying to go to a fast-paced program? Because usually people are taking out financing, and then they're thinking about how am I going to pay this back? I guess I'm just throwing a bunch at you right now. I don't know what my question is, other than should people be worried about financing?
No, that's a consideration, and it's going to be different for every individual. It's our program. I think if you get all the bells and whistles and then get a big living stipend or whatever, you could be in for $130,000 in our program at the top. That's with housing. That's with money coming into you every month to spend. Whatever. Let's say you're 150. That's a big number. And I don't think that you should do that without fully understanding what the implications are. I saw this might be what prompted your question. I saw a post online the other day that had someone selling me loan breakdown. And it was basically a what if I make the minimum payments for my whole life, and what does this look like? Which obviously it looked like crap because you're making minimum payments.
I know which one you're talking about, and I did think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're making minimum payments over however many years. It's like it looks terrible from that light. And if that's your plan, yeah, you shouldn't do this. If your plan is to make minimum payments on a $150,000 loan for 30 years or whatever, no, don't do that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm a very debt-adverse person in general, so I kind of lean more towards if you're going to take out a loan for something, pay it off as quickly as possible.
Right.
But you've got to look at this, in my opinion, as you're investing in a career, and if you do that, whether you're doing that here or a 4-year university or some other trade school, whatever, you've got to look at what's your return on investment. I think if you look at it in that context, we beat universities and we beat other trade schools by a lot because of what the income potential is for this career. There aren't a whole lot of pilots out there making, $60,000, $70,000 exercising an ATP certificate.
Right.
You're usually doing pretty good.
Right, and it's niche in that way too.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could go to truck driving school and make anywhere from $45,000 to $300,000, but if you get an ATP certificate and you're exercising that certificate in the industry, you're making above six figures. And if you're making above six figures and paying minimum on your student loans, then you're stupid.
Right, and that's not exactly. Well, are there people? Does it take a little while to get to that six-figure number?
You are and I'm sure that y'all have talked about this on the podcast before. You are looking at anywhere from a year to 2 years to get to 1,500 hours after you graduate. If you get a CFI job, let's call it 2.5 years, because you have to wait around 5 months and find a CFI job. 2.5 years before you get to the hours, and then the regionals are high 90s, low six figures. If you come in making high 90s, you're not doing it for very long, or you're choosing not to fly a whole lot. It is not difficult. Let's call it to within 5 years. It is not difficult within 5 years of getting your program done here to be making six figures.
So I guess what I'm hearing so far, and again, obviously I work here at Thrust Fight. I'm trying to ask the questions that do a good job at representing people's fears and concerns when thinking about going after their dreams. Because what I think we do here is we make people's dream of being an airline pilot accessible. That's how I look at it. Because when I was younger, there's a lot of things I didn't think were accessible. I've heard a lot of CFIs and students here say, I didn't know I could do this. I always wanted to, but I never knew I could. And then they come here. I think that's all over our podcast. So if you're a listener, you should have heard that before. If you're a new listener, well, go watch some of those and you'll find it. But I guess what I want to do now is ask you about whether or not, are most people succeeding at finishing our program?
Yes.
And are most of those people working in aviation?
Yes.
I got you. You may not have this number on your head, and it may not be as impressive to some people, maybe industry-wise it is. Do you know if a lot of the pilots that graduated from our program are working in the airlines? Like, is there a large percentage there?
Is there a large percentage of our graduates working at the airlines?
I say large comparatively. Like, what's the likelihood of getting to the airline if you come into a program like ours or ours?
Hang on, we can cut me scrolling through my phone here, but
Okay.
I've got this. This is from that audit I was talking about that we did last June or July. 40% of our graduates were flying at an airline. 50-something percent, I'm having to do math in my head. About 50% were instructing, so that's kind of a breakdown. We had 40% as of July last year of all of our graduates, which the program was 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 5 years old.
Okay.
So 40% of that would have been our first graduates were in 2020 into 2020. That would have been our 2020 and our 2021 graduates were at the airlines. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty dang close to 100% if I'm doing the math right.
Yeah. Well, I guess I like to ask these questions again to try to represent people's concerns. But I'm hoping that if you're watching this, if you still have any questions, we're gonna move on a little bit. But if you're still having any questions, please put them in the comments. We like to have conversations in the comments of these videos. That's if you're on the YouTube. If you're streaming, maybe find our YouTube and participate if you have any questions, because I don't want people being misinformed online we had one of our most recent podcast episodes was with a young gentleman who in 2019 chose not to go to flight school because someone scared him out of it, sort of. Like, they made it seem like, hey.
That's bad timing.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was bad timing, but he came back around 3 or 4 years later, and now he's a student here. He's about to become a CFI.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he's one of our more recent podcast episodes. He heard the numbers about the math, about the loan. He's like, I'm a finance guy. I don't like the loan, so I didn't do it. And then he talked to the right guy who did do it, and he's like, well, that's what I've always wanted to do. And then they worked it out together, and here he is. And he's not regretting it at all right now. So, I mean, everyone's situation is different. You can't compare yourself to people you don't know, but at the end of the day, like, you know what I mean? People overcome the fear every day.
Yeah, this isn't right for everybody.
Yeah.
all we can do is tell you what we offer and let you decide if it's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to ask you this, moving on to some of those moving on from some of those heavier questions. I'm sure you can see some of the ways that people succeed. So what are some of the things you see that would be a good tip for someone else to model after to help them succeed in a program like this?
Be at the school all the time. We talked earlier about how that support group helps out a lot. The students that succeed are at the school all the time, even on days when they're not flying, even on bad weather days when they can't fly. They're at the school talking, helping other students that are on a certificate that they just finished or what have you, and being engaged with the community. Those students are always very successful. Mm-hmm. And then this is a little bit more direct, but do your writtens before you show up. People that show up with their writtens done, that's a written is just an excuse to pause flight training once you start. So show up with your writtens done so that you can breeze through your flight training without any interruptions.
It's funny how many people still don't know that, though. It's just so hard to get that message out to people who are starting their training.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. We measure our monthly flight hours per student. So like in the private instrument and commercial ratings, most students are going to average about 30 hours a month, thereabouts.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, something will happen where so many students in the pipeline have a written that they didn't show up with that you see like a dip in the numbers. I'm like, get these writtens done. You're like killing utilization. We're going to have like bad completion rates, completion time frames if you guys don't knock these writtens out. So show up with your writtens done. It makes it a lot easier.
Copy. I hear those two things the most when I ask that question. So to ask you that and get the same answer, well, I don't know what else. I probably won't ask the question anymore. If someone's looking into starting flight training, what are their options in order to, what are the questions they need to ask themselves if they're thinking about flying?
If they're thinking about starting flight training, what questions do they need to ask to determine the best route for them?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to pay for it? How fast do you want it to be done? What's your end goal? If your end goal is an airline, I really do believe that thrust flight or even a program similar to thrust flights, if for some reason you're hung up on thrust flight, I believe an accelerated start to finish program, focus on it all at once, is the best path to go if an airline is your goal. And the biggest reason for that is missed income opportunity on a large scale. 6 years training versus 2 years training, that's 4 years of income at $300,000 a year by the time you're a senior captain at a major. You know what I mean?
Okay, because most people, I see what you did there. I mean, you zoom out and you look at the macro and you say, I have a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan. You're talking about around 4 years difference of airline pilot income or airline, first officer.
Because you've got until you're 65 years old.
Yeah, exactly. But why don't people think of that though? I guess people are thinking about right now, right? How do I charge? How do I pay right now?
It's the same reason that people are thinking like, look, they're not hiring today, so this doesn't make sense.
It's short-sightedness.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's easy to say that, and when you're struggling with some things, it's difficult.
And
but
it comes. You keep. I'm glad you're doing that and keeping us honest, because it's not like this is not. We're kind of being the voices of not being in the moment, not being focused, hyper focused on.
Because if I'm trying to flight train right now, if I'm trying to flight train right now, I'm going to be like, where am I going to come up with all this money?
Yeah.
But if you zoom out and have a bigger goal, well, I'm more willing to take out a loan if I have a plan that looks like X, Y, and Z. But if I'm thinking about, that loan's just too big and it ends there, and I say I have to pay for it myself because I don't want that debt, well, then it puts me in a different bucket.
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't know what, you said X, Y, Z, what if you don't know it's Y and Z? All right, I'm going to go through this program and then I'm going to instruct where? Thrust flight's not going to guarantee me an instructor position. Where am I going to instruct? Yeah. And it's easy to not see an exact answer 3 years in the future and let that intimidate you. I get it. If I were in that situation, I'd probably be thinking along the same lines.
Well, you might have a point, but I have a good question for you.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, and maybe we're going to be wrapping up around with this question maybe. But if somebody doesn't know X, Y, and Z about what it looks like after flight training, could you kind of give us sort of a generalized good goal of what your path from zero time to training to airline should look like? What do you think people should be aiming for? What's that foresight? What's the insight they don't have about making a plan? 10-year plan as a pilot. What is it supposed to look like, kind of?
Your goal needs to be get to the airlines as soon as possible so you can maximize earnings throughout your lifetime. So that's why I said accelerated is the way to do it if that's your goal. That should take you at most a year and a half. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to thrust flight, call it 2 years. And then you should spend a year and a half to 2.5 years time building to your 1500. I'm not going to get into restricted ATP and wasting 3 extra years going the university route. And then once you get to 1500 after 2 years or whatever it is, you should have already selected. You should already have started engaging with different airlines. There's no reason 6 years after starting you shouldn't be working at an airline somewhere.
Right.
And that's like 6 years is being very that's very long.
Inclusive of anything that could happen.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, I mean, ultimately, maybe within 4 years of starting, I mean, if you're aggressive enough and you're ambitious or you're proactive.
We've had people do it in 2 years.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I'm trying not to come across as salesy and give you the best case scenario. But
right.
Yeah, you could do it in 2 years. Maybe things are terrible and it takes you 6.
Yeah.
But to our point before, you're not going to be at year 10 being like, oh, those thrust flight guys tricked me into thinking that this career was viable.
Yeah, exactly. That's not going to be okay. Gotcha. Well, I lied about the last question. Why do people? Do you think people are going to Part 61 schools if they have the same goal of going to the airline? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there are. I think that there's a talking point online right now, especially right now, and I don't know if it's because hiring slowed down and everyone's got a bad taste in their mouth or what, but I've seen the talking point online a lot. Mm-hmm. Don't take out a student loan, go to a Part 61 mom and pop, pay as you go, take a little extra time. And that's fine, and there are absolutely some small Part 61s where you could probably successfully do that. But we just launched our Finish Line program, which lets you come to us if you've started on your private somewhere else and want to jump into the accelerated. Mm-hmm. And I have gotten at least 50 people that have called us since we launched that, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Saying, I was scared of the loan, I went to a Part 61, I've been training for 9 months, I have 70 hours after 9 months, and my check ride's been rescheduled 4 times. I've been waiting around for a check ride. The planes keep getting broken. I have flown maybe once a week on average. Just like horror stories and stuff that thrust flight in particular, but I mean any school with resources, the large bad flight schools that have financing, any school with resources is going to be able to mitigate that stuff. And I mean we're especially good at it because we've identified that's a pain point at the Part 61s, and we want to be a solution to that. Mm-hmm.
So as much of a plug this is a solution.
it really is. Yeah. I mean, we are speaking to those guys that wanted to be airline pilots, wanted to do this quick, and listen to all of that, go to a Part 61 and train it that way, which is for some people. I'm not saying that nobody should go to these small Part 61s, and if you want to take a little longer to do it and try to save money that way, more power to you. Yeah. I think that for anyone that's airline bound, there's going to come a point when you're doing that where you are frustrated with how little you're flying and with how long certain tasks are taking.
Yeah. That makes sense. I've talked to several of those people who have literally told me that they've been wanting to come to Thrust. I talked to someone the other day. They said, I've been wanting to come to Thrust. I've just been waiting on a check ride. And before we weren't really able to help them out. But with the Finish Line program, that's what kind of gives them a different way of entering the program without having to wait on the roadblocks they're already at. Yeah. So that makes sense to me. Well, Hunter, look, I think we were a little all over the place. I wanted to ask you so many questions. I'm hoping that people listen to this and at least hear some of the information you're able to share and sort through what use their discernment to say, okay, like I like what he's saying here, and oh, I don't trust this, and go do their research, whatever they need to do. But I hope that this episode serves as a good resource for them if they're looking for it. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, and if you guys are still watching this episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say, that means you must have liked something or you must have been concerned about something. Please leave a comment. Only about 4% of our common listeners, our regular listeners, are actually subscribed. So if you could go ahead and hit that subscribe button, that would make a big difference in our channel. And here's to one more year of Pilots Say What. We'll see you guys for another 52 weeks.